also by the superintendent and some other people like myself, and perhaps Jared this week. Anyhow, Section B is governance and administration. Basically, that section lays out how the structure of management is within special education. So because of the changes to Section B this year, I submitted a new version. Particularly, the reason I did that is because they made my position, instead of a director, it was an assistant superintendent over special ed. So it kind of changed and funneled down through the system. The next section is the annual budget plan. And if you had a chance to look at it, it's a breakdown on where the money's going for special education, all the different services and so forth that are allotted, and that was done by our budget department. And then there's a section E, which is the annual service plan. And the annual service plan basically breaks down all of the different DIS services and services that we provide to our students in the district. It is required that this plan be brought to the governing boards for approval prior to being submitted to the CDE by June 30th of each year. In addition, it also is a requirement to allow 30-day comment period for the local parent organization, which we did, which in our case is the CAC, the Community Advisory Committee. We are recommending approval of our local plan, and I would be happy to answer any questions you have.
I don't have a lot. I had kind of talked to Luke Harris the other day, and he had gone over this SABA plan and whatnot. So it sounds to me like a lot, and most of the changes were more kind of like terminology or like language.
Most definitely.
Most definitely, that kind of stuff. Okay.
Correct. I mean, because of the changes in the structure of management, that was probably the biggest change in Section B. But all the other sections are very similar to what was approved last year. Next year, they will be going through a whole rewrite of Section B. So I just updated it this year, and then next year we'll let Sadie handle that part.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Did anyone else have any other questions or comments? Okay, if we do not have any other questions or comments, I didn't get any feedback from any committee members on this particular agenda item, so. We're ready for a motion?
I will move to approve item 8.2, the special education local plan area for the 2023-24 school year.
I'll go ahead and second.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Mr. Whitaker, roll call vote. Mr. Crow?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Marzano?
Aye.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mr. Critchfield?
Yes.
And are you also supposed to vote, Mr. Mona? No, okay. And I'm also a yes.
Thank you very much.
That concludes our meeting for the SELPA. Our next meeting will be Wednesday, October 5th, which will be here in the County Administration Building as usual. We are adjourned. It is 5:07.
Yeah, sometimes.
We have forgotten the fries. Oh my gosh, there are fries with that sauce. Really? It is so good.
Fries?
Yes.
Yeah, cheesy fries. Don't they?
Cheesy fries.
I've never
oh
had
my,
them.
oh my god, they're so good.
But I used to like the taco that was the cinnamon toast. Do you they still
They
have
still
that?
have this. It's the cheesy fries that come and go. But man, they are so good.
Last night we had a meeting in Lodi. Russ and I did, so we went to that. The Moo Burger. That was yummy.
Yum.
Information that's good. So use that post.
order the Amador County Unified School District Board meeting. We have all the board members in attendance, and standing in for Dr. Gibson, we have Mr. Critchfield. Thank you, Mr. Critchfield. We have nobody joining us this evening, which is good. I hope everybody's on summer vacation. So we do not have public comments, and we will retire for closed session. We will return in approximately an hour. We'll see you at 6:30. welcome back. We are going to reconvene, and we are a few minutes late. It is 6:36. Mr. Whitaker, do we have any, oh, I'm gonna have to report out first. We unanimously approved case number 22/23-21, stipulated expulsion. Mr. Critchfield, do we have any deletions or corrections to the agenda?
We do not.
Excellent. We will rise for the pledge, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We do not have any presentations or recognitions for tonight. And I do not yet have any public comment cards. Did anybody want to make a public comment? Okay. They declined. There are people in the room and they said no. So moving on to the consent agenda. Does anybody have any questions or comments on the consent agenda? We have a large consent agenda tonight with the usual warrants, overnight field trip for Argonaut Cheer. We have some surplus reports. The personnel recommendations are extensive tonight. And then we have a couple of contracts for Edgenuity and Avid. No questions? Okay, I actually wanted to just point out a couple of things on the personnel recommendations because we do have so many. We are optimistic at starting the next school year with fewer vacancies than we've had in many recent years. So that is good news. I always like to shout out our local graduates who come back and teach here. So welcome back Maura Jorgensen, who just a little close to my heart is taking over her mother's classroom at Sutter Creek Primary. So welcome to all of our new teachers and staff.
Can I piggyback your statement?
Please.
Mason Wright, welcome to Jackson Elementary, Amador grad.
Oh, and we have some teachers coming, returning to us after some time away. So welcome back, Mrs. Williamson, is it? Williams Karshner. Williams Karshner. I want to get that right. We're excited to have you back. So, if there are no other shout outs, can we get a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the item 11 consent agenda. I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Crow. Mr. Whitaker, for the roll call vote. Mr. Crow?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Marzano?
Aye.
And Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
I'm also a yes. So we have a 5-0. Moving on to our discussion action items. We have a bunch for tonight. So first up, the local control accountability plan. Mr. Snyder.
Yes, thank you. Whoa. Oops, a little louder than last meeting. I'll go ahead and read just kind of through this description for formality's sake. So the LCAP is a tool for local educational agencies to set goals, plan actions, and leverage resources to meet those goals in an effort to improve student outcomes for English learners, low-income students, and foster youth. We talked a lot about last meeting how those three groups generate the money and it has to be accounted for through the LCAP, in addition to other funds that we put in there. California statute requires that before a local educational agency considers adoption of the LCAP or an annual update to the LCAP, the LEA shall, and we've done all these, we held the public hearing at the last meeting to solicit recommendations of members of the public, adopt the LCAP or annual update to the LCAP at a public meeting. This meeting will be held after, but not on the same day as the public hearing. Well, we're a week after. This meeting must be the same meeting during which the governing board adopts a budget. So hopefully we'll do that tonight as well. And this is also the same meeting at which we report the California School Dashboard Local Indicators, which is the very next agenda item after this. So we've got all those boxes checked. The approval process for the LCAP begins with a public hearing and first reading, followed by a public comment period, and culminates with a second reading and final approval at a subsequent meeting. So we've done all those things. We did have the public comment period between last week and today. We did not receive any public comments. So the document that you have in front of you tonight is the exact same document we looked at last meeting. So therefore, I'm not going to go through it in detail like I did last time, but I'd entertain any additional questions or comments at this time.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? No, we did have questions last week, just so you guys know.
We had, significant
Yes.
discussion, very exciting discussion for me, as I shared. But yes, it's the exact same thing we looked at last week, so.
If there are no new questions or concerns, could I get a motion, please?
I will move to approve item 12.1, the 23-24 Local Control Accountability Plan, second reading and adoption.
And a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Parker and Mr. Crow. Roll call vote. Mr. Crow?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Marzano? Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
And I'm also a yes.
Thank you.
Item passes unanimously. And item 2, California School Dashboard Local Indicators. Mr. Snyder.
Thank you. So the California School Dashboard is comprised of state indicators, which is information that's populated by the state, and that's mainly test scores, things like that, and local indicators, which is information that is populated by local educational agencies, or LEAs. The State Board of Education approved standards for the local indicators that support local educational agencies in measuring and reporting their progress within the appropriate priority area. For each local indicator, the performance standards are as follows. This is what you have to do in order to meet the expectation of CDE. First and foremost, you have to annually measure your progress in meeting the requirements of the specific LCFF priority, and you have to report the results as part of a non-consent item at a regularly scheduled public meeting of the local governing board or body in conjunction with the adoption of the LCAP. We have that box checked tonight. And report results to the public through the dashboard utilizing the SBE adopted self-reflection tools for each local indicator. It's interesting because we're required to report the information tonight with the LCAP, but they don't actually open the dashboard for me to enter the information in until around November. And then the public release of the dashboard is usually in December, so there's a big lag in time there. But anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in. An LEA uses the SB adopted self-reflection tools to report its progress through the dashboard. The collection and reflection on locally available information relevant to progress regarding local priority areas will support LEAs in completing the self-reflection tools, reporting it in the dashboard, and in local planning and improvement efforts. Provided an LEA satisfies the performance standards for each local indicator, the dashboard will automatically assign a performance level of MET. That's the best you can get is MET. If an LEA does not meet the performance standards, the dashboard will automatically assign a performance level of not met, or not met for 2 or more years as applicable. Really, the only way you get those ratings is if you don't do this. So, but there are districts out there who don't do that and get those ratings. So I'll walk you through this document kind of briefly, and then we can have some discussion at the end if you'd like. There are a total of 10 state priority areas. 2 of them are only applicable to county offices of education. So for school districts, there's 8 state priority areas. Not all of them are measured by the local indicators. Some of them are state indicators, but if you look at page 3 in the local indicator self-reflection tool, the first one is state priority 1, and these are really just the basics, the Williams Act basics, appropriately assigned teachers, access to curriculum-aligned instructional materials, and safe, clean, and functional school facilities. So that's just straight up data that we report there, misassignments, facilities, and students without access to standards-aligned instructional materials. That's just straight up information there from Human Resources and from our facility inspection tool. Then, and we'll come back for questions at the end. The next state priority area is priority 2, which is implementation of state academic standards. And really, these are all self-reflection ratings, and they go from page 4 all the way, pages 4, 5, page 6, and they end kind of with a little narrative at the end of page 6. And so you just kind of rate yourself in each of those areas, and they're pretty specific around how have you done providing professional learning? How are your instructional materials that are aligned to the standards? How are your policies and programs in helping staff identify areas they can improve? So they're very specific for each one of those, and we just kind of reflect on where we think in each area. And we're, sometimes we're pretty hard on ourselves. We try to take a really hard self-examination, and, we have a lot of good conversation when we do these, and we know we can't tackle everything at once. There's a lot of competing priorities, like do we do professional development and literacy instruction, or do we do it on the PE standards or the new arts framework or this or that? And so you might see some, ratings here that you're kind of wondering about, and that's really the explanation behind it. We just can't do it all at once, and so we try to tackle as much as we can. And especially coming out of the pandemic with staff just feeling like they were burnt out on professional development and didn't want anything more. We've kind of gradually resumed a lot in these areas and look forward to more in the years to come. Page 7 is state priority 3. That's parental involvement and family engagement. And again, there's some self-rating scales along with a narrative, significant narrative in each of those areas. So building relationships with families, building partnerships for student outcomes with families. That's page 9. Page 10 is building partnerships. That's the actual narrative for that one. Page 11, seeking input for decision making, and then some narratives around that. And the end of page 11 is where that concludes, parent and family engagement. Page 12, state priority 6, school climate, and that's just a pretty long narrative there around the California Healthy Kids Survey. That is what you write to for that narrative. So it's very similar to what we looked at in the LCAP. A little bit more in-depth analysis of that. State priority 7 on page 13 is access to a broad course of study. Do our students have more than just math and English language arts? Do we have AP classes? Do we have electives? Do we have, what types of things do we offer our kids above and beyond what's just the standard core curriculum? And again, all of those are narrative. And that wraps up the local indicators. Again, these are ones that we have to fill in. They're not populated by the state. The ones that the state populates in the dashboard for us are pretty black and white, like test scores and things like that. So I would be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Just real quick, were the, where it talked about like school climate and parental involvement and stuff, were those also self-reflection, or were those, answers given by the public? I was just a little.
The school climate is just a summary of our analysis of the California Healthy Kids Survey data, so we use those results. But the parent involvement, those are all self-reflections. Like, how do we realistically feel like we're doing in each of those areas? Building relationships, involvement in decision-making. So, of course, you could see a connection between what we looked at last meeting with the parent survey, but we also talked about maybe some of the shortcomings with that parent survey data. So this is more us really feeling how we're doing.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Snyder, on page 3 of 14, where it talks about facility conditions, identified instances where facilities do not meet the good repair standard, including deficiencies and extreme deficiencies. 11, and we have 11 sites in the district?
There's actually 12, so the only one that did meet the good repair is Independence. For years, the last couple of years, we started having an outside firm come in and look at the facilities and take maybe a little harder look at them. And I don't think it's any secret that our facilities could use some upgrades. And so, good is there's a lot more to that definition that we could get you plenty of literature on, but at this point, 11 of 12 do not meet the good repair standard.
And I just remember back a year or two ago, was it are we going in the wrong direction right now? I realize that we have older facilities that we need a lot of work on.
Yes, we had 8 last year and 11 this year that did not meet the good repair standard.
Okay. Thank you.
It's a state tool that's used. It's the same inspection tool that every district in the state has to use to inspect their buildings. It's called the FIT, Facilities Inspection Tool, and it's very specific and very detailed, and it tells you exactly what to look at. So that's the tool that's used to measure that.
Does that, Sean, does that element have like a extensive report that
Yeah,
lines out each school that can be shared publicly?
Yeah, that's on our website already, on our facilities page. And so it lays out school by school, you go classroom by classroom, and there's a matrix that you follow, and it has you check for every single thing that you could possibly think of with the facility. And so you also have to understand that when he talks about extreme deficiency, like I'll use Ione Junior High as an example. Ione Junior High overall as a school is in really good condition, but there's 2 brick buildings on that campus that are very, very old, and they have cracks going down the sides. They aren't used very much by students, one of them not at all, but those are considered extreme deficiency. So that school is actually one of the 11 tagged with an extreme deficiency, even though the majority of the buildings that students occupy and use throughout the day were built in 2004 or sooner. So again, yes, we do have aging facilities, but with the extreme deficiency, it literally could just be one thing at that school, and that school has one extreme deficiency. And so it's counted that way.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions? Okay, and we would love to see a motion to approve.
I move that we approve item 12.2, the California School Dashboard Local Indicators.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Whitaker and Ms. Parker. Roll call vote. Mr. Crow?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Marzano? Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
And I'm also a yes. We have unanimous approval. And
Thank you.
12.3, the federal addendum to the LCAP. Mr. Snyder.
Yes, yet another plan. So, local education agencies applying for Every Student Succeeds Act federal funds must complete and submit to the California Department of Education the LCAP federal addendum as part of meeting the requirements for the ESSA LEA plan. Excuse me. California's ESSA state plan significantly shifts the state's approach to the utilization of federal resources in support of underserved student groups. This LCAP federal addendum provides LEAs with the opportunity to document their approach to maximizing the impact of federal investments in support of underserved students. So it really is all about telling how we spend our federal funds. The LCAP is mostly about state funds that come in. And this doesn't have to be done every year. I looked, and this had been last presented in 2019, and I took a good look at it this year. You're just supposed to update it as needed, and I felt like it was time to bring it back for a few pretty minor updates. The focus is on describing in here how you use your federal funds to really supplement the goals in the LCAP. It's all the idea is that it all works together. So I'll give you a quick walkthrough of this document, and then we can have some discussion on this. It's unfortunate these pages are not numbered because it's pretty handy when they are, but I'm just going to flip through to the very first section where I had to type narrative where it says strategy. That's really just your overall strategy for using your federal funds. And for us, we get about $700,000 in Title I dollars, maybe a little more than that, $750, somewhere in there. Title II, we get about $110,000, and Title IV, we get about $51,000 to $55,000. So it's not, I mean, it's significant, but we're not talking huge dollar amounts here, all in total under $1 million. So the second part is about alignment, how you use your federal funds to support the LCAP is really what that section's about. Some of these sections are federal requirements, but California said to the federal government, all of these things are addressed in our LCAP. We're not going to make them write them over again in this plan. So that's where you see some of those things that there's nothing by them. It's because it's addressed in the LCAP. So let's see, if you want to go to the next section that has some narrative on it, it's called Title I Part A. And it's about 5 pages in. And this really is a description of how we use those Title I funds. And those are really for improving academic performance of our students, is what Title I is all about. And we really use the majority of that to fund the intervention teachers. We provide intervention teachers for all schools now, both high school, junior high, and elementary. We stretch the federal funds as far up as we can. We fund all elementary intervention teachers with Title I, and I think we're able to get 1 junior high teacher out of the Title I before we run out and don't have enough to fund the rest. So really, if you're thinking, I mean, that's what most places do with Title I. It improves academic achievement of students. It's a direct service to the kids. So that's really the main thing that we do with Title I. If you continue on through that section, there's a lot of things there. It talks about how do you invest in your teachers? How do you make sure you don't have ineffective teachers? By definition of the federal definition. School-wide programs. We don't have programs for delinquent students. Just, several different narratives there talking about the Title I money and how it supplements the LCAP goals and services. If you go to the section that has kind of the beige colored background, they kind of delineate the different funding sources by the color of background there is. So like the blue is all Title I. Then you get to the beige and that's really Title II, and Title II is all about professional development for staff and supporting new teachers. So we use a majority of our Title II funds to pay for induction for our teachers, new teacher induction. Every teacher has to do a 2-year program when they enter the profession to clear their credential. And so we, along with most districts, have chosen to fund that and cover it for the teachers. So there's a fee to Sacramento County Office of Education, and then there's a mentor fee that we pay for that. So really, that's where the majority of our Title II funds go. And again, you can see a little more description here. A lot of this is similar to what is in the LCAP. I had to write the CSI section in here as part of the Title II, and it's the exact same thing that we had in the LCAP. So there is duplication of effort in this, even though they had some of those sections that we didn't have to complete or fill out. At the end of the beige section there, it just talks about what assessment data do you use to analyze, how the funds should be used. And that concludes the Title II piece. The yellow background section is about Title III. And you get Title III funds based on the number of English learner students you have. And we have so few that we would get the minimum allocation of $10,000. And Title III has the most stringent compliance that comes along with taking those dollars of any federal funds there are. And so we have opted not to take Title III since well before my time here. Just the reporting the business office would have to do and my office would have to do. There's a whole separate plan for Title III that comes with it. And so for the $10,000, you don't really get much for that amount of money. So we've declined to take those funds for many, many years. And then the final section, it's kind of the purple. It's actually on the very last page of this. That's Title IV, Part A. And Title IV really covers 3 different areas. 20% of it a minimum of 20% has to be spent on safe and healthy student activities. So we use this for the ALICE trainings. We fund people attending those and anything related to school safety. A minimum of another 20% has to be used for well-rounded education activities, which are arts and music, counselors, things like that, social emotional learning. Those are some examples of what they consider to be well-rounded education activities. And then the rest of it to support one or more effective use of technology activities. And you can only use a certain amount on infrastructure. You can't just take it all and buy computers or things like that. So it's very kind of scripted as to how you should spend these funds and what they can be used for. And our description of Title IV is on the very final page in the purple there. So I would be happy to facilitate further conversation on the LCAP federal addendum, if you'd like.
I don't have any questions.
It's another compliance document is what it is. Heavy, heavy compliance. If you take federal funds, you have to write this or you don't get them and they take them away and you just have to describe how you're using them to supplement your LCAP.
And when did you say this was last updated or brought to the board?
2019. And
Okay,
not a lot changes. I mean, we've used our Title I for intervention teachers for years. We use Title II for induction and professional development. You know, Title IV is not a whole lot with this changes. So some of the verbiage in our LCAP goals had changed. So I felt like it should be updated just to reflect that. And we're going through an FPM review next year, Federal Program Monitoring. So they're going to look at all this stuff. And I just wanted it to be current. So felt like the time was right to bring it back.
Why are we going through FPM?
You go through every 2 or 3 years. It's just a cycle. There's
Okay.
nothing, not because of any reason. It's our turn.
Just.
Well, I want to thank you and your staff for, addressing this early rather than trying to catch up afterwards. I always like to see that.
Trying to look ahead, yeah.
If nobody else has any questions or comments, last call.
I move to adopt item 12.3, the LCAP federal addendum.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Whitaker and Ms. Parker. Again, roll call vote. Mr. Crow?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Marzano?
Aye.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
I'm also a yes, so that passes unanimously.
Thank you.
And we get to look at the budget again. Mr. Critchfield?
Yes, thank you. So last week when we presented the budget, we discussed the budget more on a state level and what was going on with the current budget and how personal income tax in the state is down, and some of the projections based on the future are showing a potentially mild recession coming up. And so tonight, the main document I'd like you to look at, we have all the same documents we did before, showing all funds for the district and the budgeted revenues and expenditures that are anticipated for next year. The first attachment is called District Annual Budget Presentation. So that is it's a PDF, but it's PowerPoint that I put together showing just kind of the main points and the main numbers that you are probably interested in when it comes to our budget. So that second page there has 2 pie charts, and it shows you our revenue and expenditures. And as you can see, we're reverting back to where we were pre-COVID. Without having a lot of one-time funds, we are now back in the situation where the local control funding formula is anticipated to be responsible for 81% of our revenues. And again, that revenue is tied directly to our student enrollment and how often those kids attend school. And the formulas there that I explained last week. And so we anticipate that total being about $49 million. When it comes to that determination, you get to use one of 2 numbers. You get to use the current year or the prior year average daily attendance, whichever one is higher. So if our attendance happens to go down next year, we won't be penalized for that. It would hurt us in the following year. We don't anticipate that happening. We anticipate our attendance continue to go up. Attendance percentages improved in the second semester this year, and our enrollment continues to increase, what I would call small increases in enrollment, but better than the majority of the state, which is seeing major decreases in enrollment. And so again, that number can change as well. It's based on the current budget forecast of an 8.22% COLA. And then the second slide on that page shows you our expenditures. When you look at the breakdown, you can see that a large percentage, over 75%, I think it's about 77% of all of our expenditures are on people. We're definitely in a people business. It takes a lot of people to run our schools, and so you can see between certificated and classified salaries and then employee benefits that those 3 pieces of the pie make up over 75% of all of our expenses. As part of a budget, we're also required to project not just the current year, but the 2 years that follow. There is one thing I can guarantee about the multi-year projections is that they are 100% most likely wrong, because we don't really know what's going to happen over the next couple of years. And so these are what we do with a multi-year projection is we base it off the information we have today. So they have projections for 2024 and 25, what the COLA will be, 25 and 26 what the COLA will be, and we make projections based on what we think will be our enrollment and attendance data, how much we'll pay our employees, and we use that information to demonstrate that we anticipate to be fiscally solvent for not just the current year. Why, I shouldn't say current, we haven't wrapped up. We have 9 more days for the current fiscal year, but for the budget year starting July 1st and then the following 2 fiscal years, we anticipate not just being able to meet our expenses, but the kicker is, will we have enough in our reserves? The requirement from the state is 3% of total expenditures that we keep in reserve for economic uncertainties. And we anticipate having over 6% and upwards of 7% in the coming years. And then that bar graph shows you how far we've come. I've gone back, I think I show, what do I show on here? 10 years of our balances. And so if you look back, we're putting 17, 18 further and further in the rear view mirror. That bar is dark blue. It's hard to see because it's so small back in 17, 18, but we're in a much better position. As you can see, 6 years ago, we had $141,000 in our reserves, and we're anticipating having, by the end of this fiscal year, $3.6 million, and then by the end of next, $4 million in reserves. So much better financial position than we were in. The following slide then demonstrates the reserve requirement. So we're anticipating a total of $62.3 million worth of expenditures next year. Given all of the COLA boosts and everything that we've had, our budget has grown significantly over the last 5+ years. And so this is a district budget that is very robust and has a lot of offerings for our students, and over 500 employees now to educate those 4,000+ students. And so we anticipate expenditures being about a little over $62 million. 3% of that would be $1.87 million, and we're anticipating by the end of next year having over $4 million in reserves. Now, that may seem like a lot above the minimum standard, but I've talked about this before. 3% reserves, when you spend 77% of your money on people, that does not even cover 1 month of payroll. So while that is the state's minimum standard, that is not our standard. That's still a precarious position to be in when you're looking at trying to cover all of your expenses. If you barely have enough for 3%, you don't even have enough reserve to cover 1 month of payroll. And then beyond that, everything else is pretty straightforward based on the information we have today, and that I hope that makes more sense due to our conversation we had last week about the volatility of the state budget. That will not be enacted until probably the 28th or 29th of this month. We are required to have this go to the board twice and have it board approved no later than the 30th. And so everything's based off of the May revision. There's a lot of jockeying still going on in the state legislature. And so we'll see what happens with the governor and our other legislatures to see what the enacted budget will be. This last slide kind of lays out the next few big ticket items when it comes to our finances. So again, we will analyze once the budget is enacted if we need to do a 45-day revision to that budget. So that would come, if it were to happen, that would come probably at the first August board meeting, where we would do a 45-day revision if things change significantly from the information we have now. Then no later than October 15th, we will report our unaudited actuals, which will be our report on this fiscal year that's wrapping up 9 days from now. And then by December 15th, we will do the first interim budget certification. And by that point in time, we'll know a lot more about the budget, about our employees and attendance projections and everything else, and we'll do the revisions needed for first interim. And so the recommendation is to adopt the 2023-24 annual budget, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I know that we asked a lot of questions last week. Does anybody have any questions they would like to pose again, or follow-up questions? So Jared, I did actually print out a lot of those attachments, unfortunately.
That makes me happy in a very weird way, but thank you.
So
no one looks at those, but I'm glad you do.
The numbers are so tiny, I wanted to be able to
Oh, okay, I understand.
So, some of the
print is tiny, the numbers
Yes,
aren't tiny. I want to be clear, okay.
clarification, important. So there's some of the changes, because you have at the end, the far right column is how much that amount changed from 2022 to 23 to the one that we're proposing now.
Yeah.
And some of them are very large numbers, like 200%, 300%. Can you tell us why there would be such a huge variance from one year to the next?
So it just depends on what you're looking at. So I'm assuming the 200% number you're looking at is current year estimated actuals compared to next year's budget. And so when you look at it on the surface, it shows next year we're going to bring in 60.4 million in revenue, but spend 62.3 million. On the surface, that looks like an upside down budget. But there are one-time federal and state revenues that we've received this year and even going into last year that have yet to be spent, that are use it or lose it funds. We can't keep claiming that as revenue. So the revenue's already been claimed in a prior fiscal year. And so that is our effort to spend those one-time monies down. So it's actually intentional that next year's budget on the surface would look upside down. So that 200% is saying the current year budget is estimated to be right side up by 1.4 and next year upside down by 1.9. But the key is if you look, that's the combined column, but if you look at unrestricted, right, then we're anticipating being right side up in our unrestricted funds and actually adding a few $100,000 to our reserve total. And that really, when it boils down to it, is restricted funds. We look at everything in the end combined, but you really have to separate out the unrestricted and restricted. And if we're upside down in our unrestricted funds, that could pose a long-term problem for us because that wouldn't be sustainable. But if we're upside down in restricted funds, what that normally speaks to is we've already claimed revenue in a prior year and we need to spend that money down or we're gonna lose it anyway. Does that help?
It does. What's an example of some of those restricted funds just off the top of your head?
Well, the two that we were talking about last week that we had such a thrilling conversation about that are being cut by the governor, we still are receiving some of those funds. The discretionary block grant is one of those that's being cut. And then we also have the Learning Emergency Recovery Block Grant. I always forget it. I call it Lerberger. So anyway, so those two were cut, but we still have a few $1 million that we received from those. So those are one-time funds that need to be spent down. And then we're just still working down on a few other COVID relief and learning loss monies that have some leftovers that we'll be spending down that have expiration dates coming up within the next fiscal year.
So we received those funds previously and we were given X amount of years to spend it.
Correct.
And that's why we see these large negative or positive numbers swinging is as we actually do what we're supposed to do with those monies.
So if you go to section F, line E, and what you're looking at on Fund 1, so the Reserve for Economic Uncertainties, you'll notice in estimated actuals, 3.665 million. And then for next year, 4.013 million. So that's the unrestricted dollar amount that we anticipate increasing. Now granted, a less than $400,000 increase on a $60+ million budget is not there's not a lot of fat in this budget, if that's a way to say it. I mean, when you look at your personal budget, that is probably the equivalent of your yearly budget being right side up by probably about $20 or $30. So there's not a ton of variance in there. But when you have strong reserves, these dollars are intended for students now. It's not intended for us to just sock away, right? And so we're in a stronger position and we should be spending the majority of the funds that we receive because the point is to provide the current students with the right education, so.
So one of the things that I want to ask, and it is kind of HR related, so if you can't answer it, I get that, but the retirement contributions that we make are set by the state, and aren't they scheduled to increase again?
So STRS is right now, that's for certificated staff. STRS is set to be flat for the foreseeable future. Now flat at 19.1%, which go back 10 years and we were paying under 10%. So it's gone up pretty steadily and fluctuated a little bit over the last few years, but it's flat. Now PERS is another story. So PERS is the retirement system for our classified employees. And I've said this before, I don't want anyone to interpret this like I don't think our classified employees should get a good retirement. I absolutely think they should. Now, that fund, if I'm giving my opinion, has not always been managed well. And that board, the PERS board, was given authorization to essentially set the rate at whatever they deem it needs to be to keep the fund right side up. Those increases do not have an end in sight. So I'd have to pull up, I can't remember off the top of my head because I tend to be shaking my head when I read the PERS numbers. They're in the mid-20s percentages for next year. So that means if every $100 we pay a classified employee, we then have to contribute another 20 some odd dollars for PERS, and then the employee makes a contribution as well out of their pay. And so PERS is my bigger concern. STRS, we've learned to live with it. I don't love it being a lot higher than it was, but if it can remain flat, at least that's something we can better plan for. But if PERS continues to increase, then the other way to look at this is classified employees can make the same amount of money from one year to the next, but it actually costs the district more to employ them when their salaries remain flat. And that's frustrating on both ends, right? That's frustrating for our employees and it's frustrating for us as the employer.
So the reason that I ask is because that's one of the biggest wedges of our pie is employee benefits, and I assume that STRS and PERS are included in employee benefits?
You have STRS, PERS, and then the other large one, there's some other things in there that's getting way down in the weeds, but STRS and PERS are your two big ones, and the health and welfare cap contribution. So we have labor agreements
Right.
where classified employees have a $12,000 health and welfare cap, certificated in management and confidential have a $10,000 health and welfare cap if you're a full-time employee. So that's the district's contribution to health and welfare. That's a huge expense. STRS and PERS are the three largest expenses in that category.
So, yeah, and that's 24% of our total budget
Correct,
right now, and we know it's going to increase, so,
correct.
yeah, that's why.
Yeah, and if you went back and looked
That's why
at
I
this.
asked about it specifically.
Yeah, if you went back and look at this pie from years past, it was not 24%. It was significantly lower, but as STRS and PERS have increased, that percentage continues to climb. So again, these are dollars that our employees will see when they retire, but they don't see now.
And then the last thing I wanted to ask about, just for the benefit of people who want to know that we're actually looking at the budget in detail, was the average daily attendance, because we are asked to project what our ADA is going to be, and we show a pretty healthy increase. What do you base that projection on?
So there's a term in the attendance world called cohort survival. Kind of almost sounds like, junior high. But you look at each grade level and anticipate that the majority of those kids are going to roll to the next grade level. And then you look at your past history. Now, we had that down pretty well pre-pandemic. You look at our enrollment history over the last 4 years, it's all over the map. But if you pull out the pandemic years, we are in a mode where we can anticipate enrollment pretty accurately. I mean, we've been, one of the things that we do as part of this report is criteria and standards. And I mean, we've had years where our anticipated ADA of, close to 4,000 students was within 10 or 12 students when it actually happened. So, I mean, we've gotten to the point where we're pretty accurate with this. We use a lot of the best information we have right now. And so we look at how many kids are enrolled as of, I look at this right up until we finalize the budget. I keep looking at, okay, well, I go into Aries and I pull the data, look at how many kids we have, analyze it, and then just look at, how many new students have we brought in. And then normally when we hit August, there's a lot of student movement. The ins and outs over the last few years, absent the COVID years, right, the ins and outs seem to balance, if not go up a little bit, because what happens is our schools shut down for summer. We don't have any staff on campus, and so we don't have families that unenroll, and we also don't have the new families enroll, and then all of a sudden they come back 2 weeks before school starts, and you'll start to see the movement in and out. But that tends to balance, if not shift a little bit in our favor as the new school year starts.
Have you seen an increase yet because of the expansion in TK and preschool?
Oh, definitely. I mean, our ADA and TK last year, 21-22, was I think about 38, and this year, or 40, it was in the 40s. And then this year it was 76. So, yeah, we've definitely increased, and we anticipate more of an increase next year because 2 more months become eligible for TK next year as well.
Does anybody have any follow-up questions?
I did want to ask one thing. Last week, we had talked a lot about those one-time funds and with the budget, and then
Yeah.
you had kind of mentioned the state being able to take some of those funds back or kind of like whatever with those funds. But so, and then you just were talking about having a budget that was super tight. So what happens in the instance that we have these funds that we're supposed to be able to use and now the state takes them back?
So these are based off of the projected cuts to those funds.
Okay.
Which there are members of our state legislature fighting to keep those budget numbers whole. But again, that's a hope at this point, and hope is not a plan. So we're basing it off of the current governor's May revision, which projects a 50% cut in discretionary block grant and a 33% cut in the Learning Emergency Recovery Block Grant. So that tends to be the worst-case scenario. Now, granted, it could come in worse than that, and then that's where the 45-day revision comes in, and first interim and all those other things. I mean, there's plenty of movement that can happen in a budget early on.
Okay.
Did anyone else have any questions? If not, we can have a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve item, or to adopt item 12.4, 2023-24 budget.
And a second?
I will second.
Thank you, Mr. Crow and Whitaker. Roll call vote. Mr. Crow?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Marzano?
Aye.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
And I'm also a yes. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
And we are going to have another public hearing. I'm going to open the public hearing for the 2023-24 SELPA plan. Does anybody want to make any comments or questions on the SELPA plan? I'm going to read this blurb while you think about it. The local plan is a document required by the CDE to be developed and updated each year by the SELPA, Special Education Local Planning Area. This plan contains assurances that the SELPA has in effect policies, procedures, and programs governing access to special education and services for all students residing within the geographic region served by the SELPA. If there are no comments, we're going to close the public hearing. And Mr. Moreland is going to present officially for us the SELPA plan.
Thank you very much. So the SELPA plan is required to be presented to all of the boards for the different LEAs in your district. So I'm bringing this for you in the ACUSD district as well for approval. Mr. Snyder coined the term, it's a companion item, so it's the same item that we presented at the SELPA meeting, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you had at this time.
So I'll kind of repeat just what I asked in the SELPA meeting. Just, I had talked with the CAC and they get to review this as well. So there's a full rewrite happening next year. Was that what I heard? Okay. And then this year, most of the changes had kind of been more language and terminology, kind of smaller changes. Is that correct?
That's a great question. Of the 4 different sections, 3 of them are done every year. Section B is more detailed on governance and structure of your organization, and it is only done on a 3-year cycle unless there's been major changes to your organization. So I chose to update it a little bit this year, not completely, but to add the change from the director to the assistant superintendent of special education, because I felt that was a major change.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Would anybody like to make a motion to approve?
I will move to approve item 12.6, the SELPA plan for the 2023-24 school year.
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Parker and Mr. Crow. Roll call vote. Mr. Crow?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Marzano?
Aye.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
And I'm also a yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Moreland. 12.6, 12.7, board policy update, Mr. Critchfield.
Yes, this is a board policy update along with rescinding 2 resolutions that were passed in 2010. This is not something we do very often. Those resolutions at the time were completely fine, but they're now outdated because those resolutions stated that volunteers at our schools, if they are injured while on one of our campuses, would be covered by the workers' compensation program, okay? But they're not employees. So workers' compensation only covers employees. So this is not leaving our volunteers out high and dry as if they got hurt on one of our campuses, they wouldn't be helped in some way, shape, or form. The board policy update, you'll notice, is for general liability coverage. So if a volunteer gets hurt, that doesn't fall under workers' compensation, it should fall under our liability insurance. And those are 2 completely different things, okay? And so what we're recommending tonight is to update the board policy 1240 for the general liability coverage and to rescind those past resolutions that state that volunteers will be covered under the workers' compensation program. If we don't rescind this, then we would have a resolution that says that a volunteer gets hurt, they claim workers' compensation, our workers' compensation program automatically denies it, and now the district is on the hook without it falling under liability coverage either. So it puts us in a bad position if we don't move forward with this, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
If there are no questions or comments,
I have a quick question. Are these individual items or is it a package deal?
It's a package deal.
Okay. With that, I'd like to move that we approve Board Policy 1240 update per the Tuolumne JPA.
I'll second.
thank you, Mr. Whitaker. Mr. Crow, I'm going to take the roll call vote. Mr. Crow?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Marzano? Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
And I'm also a yes. 12.8, we have a lot of salary schedules. Mrs. DeWalt?
This is a practice that we haven't been really good at following, but every year we should be updating salary schedules to reflect the upcoming school year. So what you'll see is that change on the salary schedules. There were also a few issues with not all job titles being listed on the salary schedules, and those are PERS and STIRS requirements. And so it was really just making sure we are PERS and STIRS compliant are what these salary updates are. You'll also notice on any salary schedule attached to a bargaining unit, clarifier that we have not yet negotiated any potential additional compensation for the 23-24 school year. So we just request that you approve the salary schedules.
So I had a couple of questions. I had a question about the fact that we still have athletic director on the coaching stipend schedule. Can you elaborate why we still have that on there? Because we now have a consolidated AD.
So let me just clarify something. Mr. Hunkins was hired. He is actually the district athletic director. So his job description and his job covers athletic director for 5th through 12th grade in the district, not just any high school position. So that is something that would not be listed under an active salary schedule anymore. The athletic director that you see, we can't just arbitrarily remove a stipend. That would have to be negotiated. The other piece to that is the athletic directors at the high school also, part of their stipend pays for them to help do a lot of supervision of sporting events. And with one principal and one VP, it's not really feasible for them to cover every sporting event just between the two of them for all after hours. And so that athletic director position at the high schools does help out with a lot of supervision responsibilities. And not anybody can just be help supervise those events. It has to be a certificated person.
Thank you.
So we're gonna have athletic directors at each high school still.
For next year, yes.
But Mr. Hunkins will function as Argonaut's athletic director while being the district athletic director to get us through these next 2 years until consolidation, and Mr. Cagle will continue as Amador High's athletic director.
And correct me if I'm wrong, it's something that it's in the contract. If we choose not to have a athletic director in 3 years for the site or something because we have more vice principals for administrators for covering, if we don't have an athletic director, it's still a position in the contract, but it's not one that we're currently funding or paying for.
That is a possibility down the road, correct?
Yeah. Because I know there's a lot of things in the contracts before that have not been used on a recent basis, but they were still in the contract. My recollection is the PAR teachers. That language is still in the contract, but yet we don't have that program.
Correct.
So I had another couple of stipend-related questions on the miscellaneous stipends. Can you explain why we pay more, or why we pay a stipend to have a yearbook advisor when there's a class period for it?
Having run a high school, I can tell you that when you are creating a yearbook, the one class period that is scheduled to create a yearbook is not enough. And our yearbook advisors put a lot of time in after hours, after contract hours, with students, without students, to ensure that we have these nice publications by the end of the year. So they put in a lot of extra time beyond their contracted workday, and that's where the stipend exists.
Thank you. And then I have another quick question. So I see ag incentive on there twice. Can you explain what the difference is between those two different ag incentives? One looks like it's teacher-specific, but aren't all stipends teacher-specific?
So that's the difference between ag incentive and ag project. So this is connected to the state ag incentive grant. And so what happens is you'll have one of your ag teachers that gets a stipend for their extra duties they do beyond the workday. The other one will be working on a specific project that may be tied directly to FFA or something else, and they work extra days, like in the summer, like working fair and things like that, and then that's the pay they would receive. So it depends on the role of the ag teacher. It can be either one.
But not both.
Correct.
I'm excited to see these actually in print because I had asked for that, like, I don't know, many months ago. And we didn't have a list like this, so this is excellent. Thank you.
And all of these, after any salary schedule update will be board approved. We have kind of a new checks and balance system between Haley, our communication specialist, and the business office and HR. So they will get posted pretty quickly on the website. And then all old salary schedules will be archived. So all of that information will be accessible on the website.
Thank you. Did anybody else have any questions on any of the salary schedules?
I noticed that there's a spot at the bottom of these for review of documents by the Director of Fiscal Services, yourself, and everything, but I don't see any signatures in there.
I think this whole process of taking salary schedules just to update the year is new. And so not everybody seems to yet understand why we're taking them. And so it's just like a learning curve moving forward.
And that was an internal process Dr. Gibson had instituted. And it's more important when there's changes to the salary schedule, like a raise awarded. These are not reflecting raises. Instead, they're reflecting doing the same thing.
I think it's a great plan to have the checks on there.
For sure.
Everybody sees that, so.
So every salary schedule gets reviewed by our Director of Fiscal, Robert Norton, by me, and by Jenny before it's finalized.
Okay. Did anybody else have any questions or comments? If not, we would love to have a motion to approve.
Make a motion that we approve item 12.8, the 2023-24 salary schedules.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Whitaker and Ms. Parker. Roll call vote. Mr. Crow?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Marzano?
Aye.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
And I'm also a yes. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. And our last discussion action item, 12.9, a services agreement for SciTech Solutions. Mr. Critchfield.
Yes, this is a project that I can say with great certainty has not been done in the district ever, because we're talking about documents that go back 40 and 50 years, some of them. As a public agency, we have some pretty strict rules on document retention, and there are a fair number of documents that we are required to keep forever. And the board approved a contract actually 2 years ago with Laserfish for software that would be a document management system to house all of these documents independently and in an organized fashion. Laserfish also uses technology where you scan the document and it knows how to read it and files it automatically. So as an example, let's say an employee retires. They're gonna have a payroll file. If they worked for us for the last 20 plus years, they're gonna have a payroll file that's probably a couple hundred pages long, just one employee. And so we're required to keep that payroll file forever. If we scan it, it will hold it in this digital database and on an independent server that we purchased to then have all that information organized by that individual's name, only accessible to a handful of employees in the district. And then we no longer have to necessarily hold on to the physical copies of those documents. If you look at the breakdown of these tables on the proposal, the warehouse has 700,000 documents to scan. The business office has 1.2 million documents to scan. HR has 500,000. We have 65,000 student records, and then other miscellaneous records. If we were to have our staff do all of this scanning, I estimated that it would take all of the administrative assistants in the district office probably 6 months to complete all the scanning, and that would be them no longer doing their current jobs. They would be dedicating 8 hours a day to scanning. And it's just not possible. Like I said, we have documents going back 40 plus years that have never been scanned. So SciTech specializes in this. They work with public agencies. They have a facility in Elk Grove. We received multiple quotes from other companies. One of the quotes was double this quote. So I know $208,000 seems excessive on the surface, but we're talking about scanning and organizing millions of documents, not just a few pieces of paper. And so, like I said, one of the quotes came back at like $425,000 for the same work. And so we vetted this as best we could. They're also the company that's closest to us geographically. They would, if approved, they will come and we do a secure sign off for our documents. They will take the documents away in vans, and then they will take it to their facility where they do all of the scanning. And then they will work directly with our technology department to do a secure data upload back to our server so that we have all of these documents digitally. Now, moving forward, we will have our administrative assistants do a lot of the scanning, but it still will be hard to keep up on. And so I anticipate in the coming years, in the summer, we may have a contract with SciTech for $8,000 to just do the last year's scanning or things like that, so that we keep up on this and we don't have boxes and boxes and filing cabinets full of documents. If you ever come into my office, I actually have a pretty decent sized office square footage wise. It would be huge if I didn't have 14 filing cabinets in my office, some of them quite large, because we have so many documents that we're storing.
What was the total again?
208,000.
Are they going to return the documents to us when they're done, or do they destroy what happens to them?
The ones that need to be returned, some records retention is okay with just keeping a digital copy. Others require digital and physical. But the nice part is we can better store these if we don't need to access them easily, right? They can be in spaces that are secure but not readily accessible, because we'll be able to look all those things up digitally if we need to pull the information. So it just depends. But if it's documents we don't need to keep physically, they do take care of all the shredding and proper disposal of the documents as well.
When the district gets quotes, is there a request for proposal advertised, or how does that work?
It depends on what you do. You're not required to do a request for proposal with everything. You are for certain services. This is a pretty narrow market. There aren't a ton of companies out there that do this volume of scanning. And so this was more just reaching out and word of mouth and tracking down companies that do this on our own. We didn't do a formal request for proposal on this one.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to be going forward? Are we going to be putting our records to the electronic storage as we go, or?
Yes. Well, and again, I don't foresee our administrative assistants being able to fully keep up with the scanning. They will do a lot of scanning throughout the year, but when we hit May, June, and July, the amount of documents that we deal with, because you're going to have students who graduate, so all their transcripts and student records, any IEPs, you're going to have the turnover of employees, so every employee that has left the district, where there might be, I anticipate there will be too much for that group to handle in the summer. Throughout the year, as those documents come in, they'll scan what they can. So I think it'll be split moving forward, but you're not gonna see a contract like this anywhere near it, because if we bring it to you, we're gonna try to keep up on this every year, and so it'll be a few $1,000s a year just to keep up on our scanning. And there are many districts that do this. One of my references was Elk Grove Unified, which is, I mean, I can't imagine how many documents they have to deal with 65,000 students compared to our 4,000. And so SciTech actually can handle the workload from an Elk Grove Unified. So for us, I look at this as millions of documents. We're actually one of their smaller projects, if that makes sense, because this is what they specialize in.
I have a question. You had said that they are going to scan all the documents and they destroy or shred.
What can be destroyed or shredded, yes, after scanning.
So, and I only ask this because I've personally got contacted by the Department of Veterans Affairs in my records. Everyone's going electronically, and I get it, but what are we gonna do if something happens? Do they have that fail-safe?
So we put redundancies in place with Laserfiche and with our own backup server.
Oh, okay.
To
You said
ensure that
right.
the data is not lost.
So all these documents are already backed up with Laserfiche and all that?
Well, once they're scanned, they
Once
will
they're
be,
scanned?
yes.
Okay, okay.
We're actually less secure right now because most of these documents are just a piece of paper and they don't sit anywhere electronically.
And I read in his quote, or her, whomever, they even state it's below standard something. They said that it's like they're pretty crappy, but not in those words.
Some of the documents?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, when a piece of paper is 40 years old and been sitting in a box, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's some of them are in pretty bad shape.
Yeah,
So they have their work cut out for them on some of this scanning as well.
for sure.
And if they were to come across something that could not be scanned, then they just set that aside and we'd get it back and have to be storing it?
Yes, unfortunately, that may happen with some of these documents, yeah. They will only charge us for what has to be scanned. In all these documents, they will find documents that don't need to be scanned. They will group all those together. They will send me the information, then we will confirm, and they will dispose of them without being scanned, and which means we won't be charged for the scanning. They don't charge for finding documents that don't need to be scanned, which is one of the reasons why they're lower price, where some of these other companies, every piece of paper you hand them, they're charging you essentially the same, whether they scan it or not.
And they also said that it's 10 to 20% higher than necessary, they believe.
Well, we didn't count every document, so we went and looked at every box and filing cabinet, and then it's estimated based on the thickness of paper. I mean, it's not, I mean, we're not counting like 3 million documents one by one.
For
So,
sure.
yeah, so there's a little bit of estimating going on here.
Gotcha.
If there's no additional questions, we need a motion to approve.
I'll approve item 12.9, the services agreement with SciTech Solutions.
I'll go ahead and second. Just one other point. This will be a contract that starts July 1st, so this is all part of the adopted budget, next year's budget.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and do a roll call vote. Mr. Crow?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Marzano?
Aye.
Mr. Whitaker?
Aye.
And I'm also a yes.
Thank you.
That concludes our discussion action items. We don't have any communications this week. Mr. Critchfield, do you have a report?
No, it was only a week ago, but we are hitting our middle of summer now, and we have a lot of people taking some time off. That's much needed. Schools are closing down, if not already closed down for the summer, and I just hope everybody has a restful summer and can come back ready to go in August.
Thank you. Mr. Crow, did you want to make a report?
Not at this time, thank you.
Ms. Parker?
I do not have a report today.
Mr. Marzano?
I don't have a report.
Mr. Whitaker?
No report.
Well, shoot, I'm the only one that has a report, but it's because I'm such a fan of the fair. So I wanted to remind everyone, since we don't have a meeting until until Fair Week, to come support the fair, and all of the students and our ag students and elementary students with all their art projects. Definitely, even though the fair is advertised as Thursday through Sunday, the kids are there starting Tuesday, if not the Saturday before, when they have turned in all of their still exhibits. So all those projects are well underway right now, kind of in the heat of summer. That's when we're doing that. So look forward to seeing you all there at the auction on Sunday. With that being said, our next meeting is Wednesday, July 26th, here at the County Administration Building. Open session starts at 6:30. We are officially adjourned. It is 7:48. going to go ahead and call this to order. We have calling to order the Amador County Office of Education Board meeting. Mr. Critchfield, do we have any deletions or corrections?
We do not.
Okay. We do have presentations and recognitions. Universal Pre-K Mixed Delivery Program, Mrs. Simmons and Mrs. Bichette. Oh, bless you for printing it out.
The coordinator for the Amador Child Care Planning Council, and we hold the local contract for Amador County for the UPK Mixed Delivery Grant. And UPK stands for Universal Preschool, so if you haven't already started hearing that acronym already, you will start to more and more. So I'm just here to share an update with you on what our plan is for the Mixed Delivery Grant over the next 3 years. And and presenting to you is actually one of the requirements of the grant. So here we are. Yeah. So I just wanted to start out by sharing just kind of a quick update that explains what the difference is between UPK and TK, since those are two acronyms that we're hearing a lot right now at the same time. So UPK is an umbrella term that includes the California State Preschool Program, TK at the California Department of Education, as well as Head Start, district and local community-based preschool programs, early learning services for students with disabilities, private pay preschool, and expanded learning options to support access to a full day of services. And I just wanted to point out, on the back of your packet, there's one single handout. And if you flip it to the back, it kind of gives a nice image that kind of helps give you a good visual with the funnel there and kind of how all of these different programs work together to form a mixed delivery system. So while participation in UPK and choice of which program is optional, TK is the only option within the broader UPK frame that will be universally available and free of cost for all 4-year-old children as part of California's public education system. California's goal is to serve more children ages 3 to 4 years old statewide in high-quality preschool programs. California intends to meet this goal through the implementation of universally available TK, as well as investments in other state-funded programs, such as funding to expand the CSPP, or state preschool, and other state-subsidized programs that offer a preschool learning experience. In 2021, legislation was passed that requires any local educational agency operating a kindergarten to also provide a TK program for all 4-year-old children by 25-26. UTK means that by 25-26, regardless of background, race, zip code, immigration status, or income level, every child will have access to TK as a quality learning experience the year before kindergarten. And so I just wanted to point out, just to clarify too, again, that participation in TK is actually not required, and parental choice is still an important point to keep in mind. Next slide. So we wanted to share a definition of what this mixed delivery term means. And so it's actually a system of early childhood education services that are delivered through a variety of providers, programs, and settings, including Head Start agencies or delegate agencies funded under Head Start, public, private, or proprietary agencies, including community-based organizations, public schools, and LEAs that offer center-based childcare and preschool programs, tribal childcare and preschool, and family childcare through a family childcare home education network. And so also one of the goals of this mixed delivery grant is to also support the work of the Universal Preschool Planning and Implementation Grant, or the P&I grant, which is actually held by the County Office of Education. So we're kind of working together with those two separate grants. Next slide. So there are some required activities that we need to get accomplished under this grant. So the first is, like I mentioned, one of them is to present our plan to the school board. And also coordination with the County Office of Education. We also are required to form a work group, and I'll go into more detail on that in a minute, but our very first meeting for that we actually held last week. Plan for, but not directly fund, UPK options in a mixed delivery system that is aligned with Title V standards, coordinated services, and referrals for families to health and social support services. And also to plan for workforce development, which, as we know, is definitely being affected with the K through 12 system, but the early education, early childhood education field is having the same challenges as well as far as workforce. So that's something that we're working on too. Next slide. And some more activities that we're required to complete is to provide outreach services and enrollment support to meet the needs of families, commit to providing data, partner to plan for, align, and coordinate the plans, and conduct the activities with all LEAs in the county or region that received funding under the California Pre-Kindergarten Planning and Implementation Grant Program. So that's the P&I grant that I mentioned. And also plan for increasing inclusion of children with exceptional needs in UPK. Next slide. So there will be 5 activities that we will also be working on as well. So our first strategy is the facilitation and coordination of the discussions of the local work group. Our second strategy is assessing the parental preferences and the need for access to available high-quality UPK meeting Title V standards through a mixed delivery system for 3- and 4-year-old children in the county. Our third strategy is coordinating with special education, local and regional partners. Next slide. Our fourth strategy is establishing partnerships with childcare providers and family childcare home education networks, inclusive preschool programs, and multilingual programs. And the fifth strategy is partnering with the local Quality Counts California programs to support the workforce. Next slide. So there is a list of participants that we are required to invite to these work group meetings. And as I mentioned, we had our first meeting last week, and all of these organizations were invited. So we're required to invite local planning councils, which is ourselves, county offices of education, school districts, charter schools offering transitional kindergarten, resource and referral agencies, which for our county is the Resource Connection Child Care Resources, alternative payment programs operating preschool programs, First 5 county commissions, and for our county is First 5 Amador, contracted state preschool programs, which includes both local education agency and community-based organization programs, general child care programs serving preschool-aged children, tribal preschool programs, which in our county we do have Little Oak Learning Center, which is a preschool on the Jackson Rancheria property, private center-based child care preschool providers, licensed family child care providers, which are providers who are licensed to provide child care in their homes, private center-based child care preschool providers, oh, I just said that one, sorry, educators, exclusive bargaining representatives. So for this work, that would fall under the CCPU or Child Care Providers Union, Head Start, and faculty at local institutions of higher education focusing on child development or early childhood education and early childhood education teacher preparation programs, including institutions of higher education. So for us locally, that would be Amador College Connect. Next slide. So we have planned out our work group dates for the rest of this upcoming fiscal year. And so we tried to stagger and switch up the meeting times so that we can try and accommodate as many of those partners as possible. Obviously, a licensed family child care provider is not going to be able to attend a 9 a.m. meeting, so that's why we threw in some evening meetings as well, just as an example. And these meetings will be located at our office, which is actually located in McCollum Hill, since we fall under the umbrella of the Resource Connection, and so we merged our Amador and Calaveras offices, and now we're located in McCollum Hill. And I did include that food will be provided at these work group meetings because that's always a big draw to get people to attend. And it actually was not an allowable expense for most of our programs, but local planning councils kind of advocated to the state to allow us to spend money on food so that we could get these people to the table, so they agreed to do that. So that was a small victory that we included there. Next slide. Oh, I think we're at the end, actually. So I really like this one-page handout that I shared with you because it just kind of explains it nicely. It kind of summarizes everything in easy-to-understand terms. And so basically what this is just bringing local partners to the table who provide a variety of different types of programs for children in this age group. So that we can all kind of work together, help promote what's available for families out there. Some children might do better in a family child care home when they're 4 years old, but some might do better in a TK classroom. So that's just an example. But that's what we're there to do, is to help discuss and make sure that everyone's aware of what's going on, promoting all of those opportunities to families. And I was just going to make a note too that what this will be doing is building on the work that has already been done. We will need to work together to build trust, support effective transitions, engage and empower families, expand and support diverse and effective workforce pipeline, and align programs to meet child and family needs. So one example I wanted to throw in of kind of how this will work is, for example, our local First Five Amador sponsors the Imagination Library, which provides free books to children aged 0 to 5. They receive a book in the mail every month until they turn 5, and that's free to the families. So that is a program that promotes early literacy. So that's kind of, one of those other opportunities for families that they might not know about that does help promote school readiness. So we would be making sure that we're helping families to know about things like that. So it's kind of it took me a while actually to kind of wrap my head around what this plan even means, because I have to say, Amador County, we're already really good at all of the partners that are in this, that were listed in this PowerPoint. We're already really good at collaborating and partnering and sharing resources. So this is kind of just more of that same thing, in I guess more of an official capacity. So hopefully that kind of explains the plan. Were there any questions or comments?
I did have a quick question. This is a mixed delivery grant. Is there like an actual dollar amount of funding that you guys are going for, or that they give, or how does that?
There is, and it's, each county receives different amounts, and I should have been ready for that question, but I wanna say, I think Amador County received around $63,000, maybe 53. I can't recall at the moment, but, so it's not a huge grant. But again, we're not being funded to implement anything. This is just money to help plan. Yeah.
That was my next, oh, that got really loud. That was my next question, was that I know that having small children, it's very hard sometimes to find anywhere really to send your kids. And so I was just curious if any of this money was being able to be spent on helping people who are maybe be interested in being an early childhood provider do that. Is that part of the, or is that something separate?
That kind of does fold in with kind of in general with what we're doing, but that specifically kind of falls more under the funding that we work with through the Amador Child Care Council specifically. So, which is a different pot of money, but and also the Resource Connection Child Care Resources does a lot of that too, recruiting, mentoring, training childcare providers. So we have a lot of work to do. We know that there's not enough childcare, and that's a nationwide problem, but it's definitely an issue in Amador County as well. So that is one of our biggest goals this year, is to really work on that too. Yeah. Anything else? Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we don't have any public comments. Thank you both for being here. Next, we have the consent agenda. Does anybody have any comments or questions on the consent agenda, which includes a local child care planning council subcontract from Mrs. Pichette? If not, we can entertain a motion to approve. Yes, ma'am.
I will move to approve item 8, the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Parker and Mr. Crow. Roll call vote, Mr. Crow?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Marzano?
Aye.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
And I'm also a yes. Okay, item 9.1. The LCAP again.
Yes, thank you. So, just a quick refresher, we submit one LCAP that's combined for the district and the county office. This is the same exact document you looked at in the district meeting and the same exact document we looked at last week. So, happy to answer any other questions or have any discussion you'd like to have.
I don't have any more questions. This is like the 5th time.
Yes, and we'll see the federal addendum here in a little bit too, just to
know.
break the suspense, yeah.
Sure you haven't forgotten anything? With that, I would like to motion that we approve the 2023-2024 local accountability plan.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Whitaker and Ms. Parker. Roll call vote. Mr. Crow?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Marzano?
Aye.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
And I'm also a yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Don't go anywhere. California Dashboard Local Indicators.
Yes, so we also have to report these for the County Office of Education, and a majority of this report is the same as we looked at in the district, but I will highlight a few differences because this is specific to the county office. So if you notice, we have 0 misassignments and 0 facilities. Well, most of or all of our county facilities are part of district facilities, so that's why you see a lot of zeros there. Just one difference there on page 3. Another area where when we do the self-reflection tool with our County Office of Education staff, on page 8, you'll see a little bit higher ratings for them in the building relationships with families. And they just, when you're a parent of a student with moderate to severe disabilities, and those teachers of students with moderate to severe disabilities have very close relationships with their families. They know each other very well. So some of those ratings are a little higher. Some of the curriculum we use for our students in the county office is, there's just a few slight differences in some of the verbiage and some of the narratives. And then if you go to page 14, County Offices of Education, as I mentioned earlier, have to address all 10 state priorities. So the 2 that are introduced here are priority 9, which is coordination of services for expelled students. So you rate yourself in how well you're doing in each of those areas, providing education for expelled youth. And then priority 10 is coordination of services for foster youth. So those are 2 additions to the local indicators report from what we looked at in the district. So any questions on that or discussion?
How do you arrive at these numbers at the 5432?
Well, it gives you, if you look at the key up at the top, so 1 is exploration and research phase, 2 is beginning development, 3 initial implementation, 4 full implementation, and then 5 full implementation and sustainability. So it's a lot of sitting around in a room with a group of people talking through where, what do you think? Oh yeah, that makes sense. Or sometimes someone throws in a different opinion. So it's not an exact science. It's really just a self-reflection and a consensus building, and at the end of the conversation, you land on where you think you are for each area.
But it is collaborative.
It is collaborative, yes.
So the items that are marked 2, I notice are consistent for the district and the county side both. Like you had mentioned, arts curriculum and also the social sciences curriculums. Are those coming up for us?
Well, they are. Again, we survey our staff and what they would prioritize and what they feel their needs are. But there is funding coming in the way of the arts with Proposition 28, which was passed by the voters in November, and that is coming to us next fiscal year. Well into the fiscal year is what we're hearing now. But along with that is going to come some needs assessment and things like that. So I think you'll see an emphasis around the arts as part of that process. And history, social science, we have really started at the secondary level tackling. In fact, we have almost all new curriculum for our high school classes. You just approved Gov and Econ, I think, at the last meeting or the meeting before. And we've kind of worked our way down. We have 8th grade U.S. history. I think last year we did that. We have not done a lot yet at the elementary level with social studies, curriculum, and professional development, and that is on our list within the next year to 2 years to tackle and address. So, yes.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? If there are no questions, we would like a motion to approve.
I will move to approve item 9.2, California Dashboard Local Indicators.
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Mr. Crow? Roll call vote. Mr. Crow?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Marzano?
Aye.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
I'm also a yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder. The Local Control Accountability Plan Federal Addendum.
So this is the exact same document you looked at in the district meeting as well. Because we submit a joint LCAP, for the LCAP, we also can submit a joint federal addendum. So it's just exactly the same. Talks about how we braid our funding streams to support the LCAP goals and what we utilize the federal funds for.
Did anybody want to repeat their questions or have new questions? All right, then if we can get a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve item 9.3, Local Control Accountability Plan, LCAP Federal Addendum.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Crow, Mr. Whitaker. Roll call vote, Mr. Crow,
Yes.
Ms. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Marzano,
Aye.
Mr. Whitaker.
Yes.
I'm also a yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. The County Office of Education Annual Summary Report.
Thank you. So this is brand new for us for this year, and I'll talk a little bit about this one. It is another compliance document attached to some funding that we get. So California Education Code requires a county superintendent of schools to prepare a summary of how the county superintendent of schools plans to support school districts and schools within the county. The summary report is to be presented to the County Board of Education at the same public meeting as the LCAP adoption, which is the second LCAP meeting, as an informational discussion item. So the reason we're having to do this report for this year is because the 7 single district counties in the state of California all for the first time this year got what's called a differentiated assistance base grant, which is $200,000. Each of the county offices, that we never used to get this, but there's been some advocacy at the state level for our singles saying, wait a minute, we could be doing a lot of the same work that the large county offices of ed are if we got that funding. So along with the funding comes this report that kind of outlines how we use the funding and how the County Office of Education supports the districts, typically plural, right? But for us, it's just one. How we're using our county office dollars to support the district in our county. So just a quick walk through this document. Page 2 is the exact same beginning, the general information that's in the LCAP. You know, we're located in the Sierra Foothills. It just talks about who we are. We're a single district county. We work closely together. And then on page 3, goal 1, well, we know a function of most county offices of education is to approve all the LCAPs for all the districts in the county. Well, that's not applicable to us. So this first one, we didn't have to write to that. We submit our LCAP directly to the California Department of Education because I can't approve the LCAP that I wrote. So goal 1 there is not applicable. Page 4, goal 2, there's a few different areas to this, one of which is applicable and one which is not. The first one is, it just talks about where we get our support for LCAP development, and typically a county office of education would provide support for all the districts in their county in developing their LCAP, but for us, again, I could look in the mirror and talk to myself about how to develop the LCAP, but we actually have someone assigned to us from California Department of Education. The same person is assigned to all the single district counties in the state, so she reaches out to meet with me. Last year, I took advantage of it a few different times because it was very helpful and a lot of questions answered. This year, I felt pretty confident. We met once, and I didn't need to meet after that, but that's where we receive our support for LCAP development is from CDE. And when we're eligible for differentiated assistance, which is based on different dashboard criteria, Sacramento County Office of Education provides that for us. So the first section of that is not applicable. The next section there that you do see some entries in is all about providing technical assistance to school districts, and it's specific to this ed code section. So this is really where we talk about how we use that $200,000 we got this year to support the district. And really what we all put our heads together. We took the funding and hired the Director of Student Success, which is Ms. Clement, who has been here quite a bit, Sinead Clement. And we also used it to fund our school community outreach workers, which did a lot of the home visits, attempting to re-engage students, help our chronic absenteeism rate, and get kids back in school. So a lot of these actions you see here, well, most of these are actions that Sinead helps us support with, and there's one specific to that school community outreach workers around home visits, help link families to resources. So these are just specific actions, and we have to talk about the source of the funding, which is that new differentiated assistance base grant. That final one there, again, is not applicable. Actions we take independent of the COE. So that one there on page 5 at the bottom is not applicable. Then on page 6, goal 3 is just providing support for continuous improvement to all districts. This is really more centralized supports that the county office provides to the district. Again, I'm one person, but a lot of this is work that I do. But we are multi-funded, so part of my salary comes from the county office budget, and these are some things that I do that are directly related to county office functions. Again, overall coordination for supports of expelled youth, services and supports for foster youth, Williams reviews and visits. Those are functions of county offices, and I perform those. We did some professional development out of county funded, the Bridge the Gap for Crucial Conversations, coordination oversight of federal programs. So these are just examples of more centralized supports. And that funding did not come from the base grant. That's more, Dr. Russell helps with some of this, I help with some of this. We kind of ballpark what amount of our salaries goes toward those types of things, and you'll see that reflected at the end. So I'll call that out when we get there. Page 7, we have to talk about, every county superintendent has to talk about how they will collaborate with various agencies within the state. Maybe some of them are state agencies, some of them are other county offices of education. We have a region group of county offices. There's 14 of them that I collaborate pretty regularly with. So these are just examples of things that we do. CISC, I'm sorry, I was gonna spell that out because I know acronyms are always hard to keep up with. So what that stands for is the Curriculum and Instruction Steering Committee. It's a part of the California County Superintendents. So you have all your county soups, there's 58 of them, and then there's 58 assistant soups for ed services. So we all come together 5 or 6 times a year. So that's what CISC is, Curriculum and Instruction Steering Committee. And you can just see some other examples there of who we collaborate with. You know, you see a Y next to who it is and some of those specific activities. There's a small rural counties huddle, which is great. We get together because there's stuff unique to us. And starting next year, we're going to have a singles huddle with just the 6 of us from the small singles that get together for like, 6, 7 times a year and just get on a Zoom meeting and talk about things that are unique to us. So those are some examples of the collaboration with other county offices of ed. The final piece to this report is just breaking down the funding. And again, this is all estimated. What do you think? And so, we know that the next year, so this report actually looks ahead to next year. If you looked at the title, it's 23-24. What are you planning to do for next year? That $200,000 base grant is going up to $300,000. That was another win in the state budget. And so we're going to have another $100,000 to use in that area. And then the 277 is just ballpark estimates of portions of people's salaries who help with the foster youth, like a Regina Helmer type thing with myself, with Dr. Russell for expelled youth. All of those just kind of ballparked it to 277 there. So that is the annual summary report for the County Office of Education, and I'd be happy to answer any other questions you might have or have discussion.
Does anyone have any questions? If not, we can make a motion to approve.
I will move to approve item 9.4, County Office of Education Annual Summary Report.
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Parker and Mr. Whitaker. Roll call vote, Mr. Crow?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Marzano?
Aye.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
I'm also a yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder. And we have the budget again.
We do. So the budget report, very similar looking documents to the district side, but as you know, the county office budget is significantly smaller. However, it serves numerous purposes. The most important one is all of our employees who serve our special education students with moderate to severe disabilities are county office employees. And so those salaries and benefits are reflected there. We also have many other support providers, so speech and language pathologists and all the other supports that go with special ed. Those employees and or contracted services are also provided by the county. When it comes to revenue looks very different on the county side. The LCFF formula is quite different for county offices. There's significantly less money that comes through the LCFF formula for county offices, and the SELPA is actually housed at the county. So any state and federal special education revenues come directly to the county office as well, which is why you see such a large portion of the revenue coming in other state revenue. That's due to special education. So we have a budget of nearly $11 million for the county office and continue to remain solvent. We have projected reserves higher than the state minimum. We are required as a county office to actually have 4% reserves, unlike the 3% on the district side. And we're anticipating concluding next year with about 7% reserves. And I am happy to answer any questions.
If you don't have any questions, then we can have a motion to approve.
Move that we approve the county budget for the 23-24 school year.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Whitaker and Mr. Crow. Roll call vote, Mr. Crow?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Marzano?
Aye.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
And I'm also a yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Critchfield. And now we get to hear from someone new tonight, Mrs. Pichette for the California State's preschool program self-evaluation.
Thank you. So this program self-evaluation for the California State Preschool Program is something that is done every year. It entails several different facets, one of which is the program instrument that you have a copy of that has multiple choice items along with narrative items. It also entails me going in and doing what's called an ECHRS, which is an environmental rating scale of each of our preschool classrooms to measure lots of different areas of the environment for our preschool students, down to how many options they have of areas of interest, like dramatic play and art, how much art, student-directed art is on the walls, that's our ECHRS. And then, so from this program self-evaluation comes goals or items that we can be working on throughout the year. And it also asks for board input and approval. So out of these goals came parental involvement in education. Our goal is to provide a welcoming environment for families and invite them to participate as equal partners in the education of their children. Health and social services, our goal is for families to know where to access community health and social services to meet their unique family needs, and we do help a lot with that. We have each family upon enrollment fill out a needs assessment, and then we hook them up with community agencies such as the Resource Connection or Public Health. Education program, our goal is to ensure all children are making progress in the domains of physical, cognitive, language, and social emotional development. And our goal is to provide a program approach that addresses equity, diversity, and is developmentally, linguistically, and culturally appropriate. A program that is inclusive of all children with special needs. We use what's called a DRDP. Children are assessed twice a year with this desired results developmental profile. And then the data is shared with parents at parent-teacher conferences twice a year. One of our goals is to to incorporate that data more with our lesson planning. And so that's going to be part of our goals too. Our environment, our goal is for each of our classrooms to provide a safe, healthy, and welcoming environment that supports the broad development needs of children. Nutrition services, our goal is to ensure children have nutritious meals during their time in the program, meals that are culturally and developmentally appropriate and meet the federal child care food program nutritional requirements. And we work with Mike Pingree, Director Pingree, to offer free breakfast for all of our preschool students. And then staff qualifications and development, our goal is to implement a staff development program that adequately equips each staff member with the information necessary to carry out his or her assigned duties. And then, of course, always continuous improvement. Our goal is to implement an effective annual program self-evaluation process to support continuous improvement, and that's what we're doing tonight. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? So I was looking at the survey that you presented all of the responses, and I love that. How many total responses did you guys get to your survey?
To the parent survey, well, we had a very high number, and it doesn't have it on here. I can look that up, Julia, and I can get that to you. We have a very high percentage of parents because they're preschool parents that respond to surveys. So I would say probably in the 80% range.
Oh, wow.
Of families.
That's really awesome. Yeah, we don't get that for most of our other surveys.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And if you notice from that survey, one of the big themes is that they would like more time.
I was just going to comment
like
on
more
that.
time.
That
So
the vast majority of your additional comments at the end had to do with the length of time of the program.
And I'm trying to be very strategic with that. We are able to kind of blend and braid our program funding to help aid in some additional after preschool care options that I'm looking into for the 23-24 school year.
Excellent. Perhaps the business office can support you in those endeavors.
Michelle and I meet frequently to go over numbers and budget. She does a great job.
So yeah, I really enjoyed seeing the survey results specifically like that, and the comments were very nice, very positive, and your percentages actually for the vast majority of your topics are very satisfactory, like they're very high markings. You did really well.
Thank you.
This is awesome.
Thank you, Julia.
All right, so if there's no other questions or comments, we need a motion to approve.
I will move to approve item 9.6, California State Preschool Program Self-Evaluation 23 and 24.
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Parker and Mr. Whitaker. We'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Crow?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Marzano?
Aye.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
And I'm also a yes. And for the ELOP plan guide, Mrs. Pichette.
So this is brand new to us because we have just rebranded ourselves as the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program. And I've presented before in some of the things we've been implementing, not only because they're state requirements, but because it's what's right for kids. And so I've highlighted a lot of those things in this Expanded Learning Opportunities Program Guide, which is something that we will review as part of our continuous improvement for that program. Yearly, it needs to come to the board for approval every 3 years. But of course, we can always amend or address anything as it comes up. There are quality standards for the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program, and there are 12 of them. So I will go through those 12. 1 is safe and supportive environment. 2 is active and engaged learning. 3 is skill building. 4 is youth, voice, and leadership. That's one of my favorites. 5 is healthy choices and behaviors. 6 is diversity, access, and equity. 7 is quality staff. 8 is clear vision, mission, and purpose, which our ELOP staff actually engaged in one of their staff meetings in creating a vision and mission statement for our ELOP program. 9 is collaborative partnerships, which Ms. Simmons talked about with our UPK mixed delivery work group, and I go to a lot of community meetings where I talk about our ELOP program, and then I partner with a lot of different agencies like the library. The library is doing wonderful things, by the way, and public health to give resources to our students and families. Number 10 is continuous quality improvement. That's something that's really near and dear to my heart. I'm constantly assessing and reassessing to make sure we're giving our students and families top-notch programs. Number 11 is program management, and number 12 is sustainability. And a lot of that has to do with being fiscally responsible, and that is why I meet with Jared every other week to make sure that I'm making fiscally responsible choices when I'm thinking about program. I am happy to answer any questions. There are some sample schedules in there, and I just want to apologize for the small font in those sample schedules, but those are just sample schedules of some of the things of what a normal day in ELOP looks like.
So I noticed that you have this on the summer schedule, page 2 of that, you have the student count on the right-hand side. And is that number's going up as the day goes on, is that correct?
Yes, because when summer school gets out, our count goes up. We also sometimes will go to the pool in the afternoon too, and so kids like to get dropped off to go to the pool. I like to go to the pool.
Does anyone else have any other questions or comments for Mrs. Pichette?
A lot of good information. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll move to approve item 9.7, Expanded Learning Opportunities Program Plan Guide.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Crow, Ms. Parker. We will do a roll call vote. Mr. Crow?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Marzano?
Aye.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
I'm also a yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. I can't believe we saved this till like the end of the, okay. So we're gonna have a public hearing. We're gonna declare the public hearing open for the 2023-24 SELPA plan. I'm gonna read the blurb and then we're gonna close the hearing, so hang on. The local plan is a document required by the CDE to be developed and updated each year by the SELPA, which is Special Education Local Planning Area. This plan contains assurances that the SELPA has in effect policies, procedures, and programs concerning access to special education and services for all students residing within the geographic regions served by the SELPA. Since there is nobody here to make comments on our SELPA plan, I'm gonna close the public hearing. And we will move to the last item on our agenda tonight, which is the presentation of the SELPA. Mr. Moreland.
Thank you once again. As I said earlier in the last meeting, this is a companion item. So the local plan is the same for all three of our boards. So we're asking permission to submit it to the CDE. It's required to be approved by all LEA boards within our SELPA. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I'm gonna move that we approve the item 9, Special Education Local Plan Area for the 23-24 school year.
I second.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Roll call vote. Mr. Crow?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Marzano?
Aye.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
And I'm also a yes.
And thank you for the third time.
Thank you. That concludes our discussion and action items. We do have some personnel recommendations and again, the same salary schedules for information only. Does anybody have any additional reports or remarks?
I just want to thank our county office employees. We have many county office employees still working, even though summer break started for extended school year. And so we have teachers and instructional aides that are working all the way through the end of this month to ensure that our special education students get what they need for extended school year. So I just want to thank them and wish them a happy July when they get there, that they can have some time off.
Thank you, Mr. Critchfield. So our next meeting is Wednesday, July 26th, here in the County Administration Building, and will be immediately following our Unified School District meeting. We are adjourned. It is 8:43.